Most organizations can generate ideas. The problem isn't coming up with possibilities, it's turning those ideas into shipped innovations that actually create value. Your ideas don't get funded, or they die in development, lose momentum in stage gate reviews, or get compromised until they're unrecognizable. This episode is about changing that and building innovation systems that work. You'll learn the specific components needed to transform innovation from a random gamble into a reliable capability. You'll walk away with a framework that you can start implementing in the next 30 days. Our guest is Maggie Nichols, CEO of Eureka Ranch, an innovation firm that has contributed $18 billion in growth for client companies. Over 25 years, she's built innovation systems for Fortune 500 companies, including Ford, Humana, J&J, and Toyota. She co-founded the Innovation Engineering Movement, training over 26,000 innovators globally and recognized by Stanford University. Under her leadership, Eureka Ranch has driven over an 800% profit increase and expanded client reach by 500%. She's also pioneered AI tools that predict innovation success with 7 times the accuracy of human judgment. I'd like to get my hands on those. If you want to improve your innovation, Maggie is certainly one to listen to. And if you are listening to us now and would rather watch the video version of our discussion, go to the YouTube channel. Simply search for Product Mastery Now on YouTube. Let's jump in right after this.
How can you unlock your full potential as a product manager? We're sharing the product management insights you need. They are based on the 7 research-backed knowledge areas for product mastery. You'll learn to create products customers love, enhance your influence, and elevate your career. Welcome to Product Mastery Now, hosted by Dr. Chad McAllister, product management professor, practitioner, and your guide.
Maggie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thrilled to be here, Chad. Thanks for asking me.
I'm super delighted to be talking. We've had the founder of Eureka Ranch on the podcast a couple times, Doug Hall, and now we're going to get some clarity into how organizations create innovation capabilities through your leadership. You've helped several organizations do this. Well, let's start with that kind of perspective of maybe the organization leader or product leader that recognizes their innovation capability isn't working or they don't really have one in place. Where do they start? I assume we should look around and do some diagnostic work to figure out what's not working, what's broken. What do we need to do first?
Yeah. I mean, it is an exercise in observation for a little bit because the trick with innovation and innovation systems and being successful or not successful, sometimes the true root cause isn't hidden in plain sight. It's not
Hmm.
like you can just point at it. I mean, typically people are looking for what are the key KPIs? Are we shipping? Do we have things moving out in products? How's our stuff working in the marketplace? And those are all useful things to see. But I think there's more things you can find internally that can help you see, you know what, this is telling me a bigger story about whether or not we're good or not good at innovation. So typically, when people start to look under the hood first, you're going to look at, okay, what have we shipped and what have we done? Do we have an innovation function? Are we shipping typically new products, services? Are we bringing things to the market that we didn't have 3 years ago? I mean, those are some healthy states of innovation. And usually it's all tied in some way to growth. Those are the more obvious ones. I think the thing that you're looking for as an innovation leader in that bucket is, are there things that I think that we could do that would be cool, that our customers think that could be cool, that we say no to because we don't think we have the capability, systems, people to deliver them. I've seen far too many times where an idea becomes scary, not because your customers want it, not because you can't see ROI, not because there isn't all this great financial reason to do the idea. It's when you
Hmm.
look at the current capabilities of your systems and your people, you go, and you could look at that and say, that's just what it is. I have to find the way. That's the innovation, is to figure out how to make that happen. But if you find regularly you are dialing down what you think is possible, then you have to start to look at the other two pieces. So the second piece that you want to look at is human work systems. Do I
Hmm.
have it set up for the way that people work to be kind of counter innovation? What are the behaviors that we're asking for? What are our systems telling people that they're seeing as, here's how we want you to work and the kind of work we want you to do, and it's actually working against us in innovation? So I'll give you an example of an organization we worked with. They were a global organization. They did a lot of market research. They tended to do market research on the tail end more often than not. They'd spend a lot of money. They'd field things in multiple countries. It would take 3 months. For the first month you field it, you're figuring out what the study's going to have in it. Then you field it. Then you go get the results. And they're like, we're being prudent and rational. But when you looked at the results in the marketplace, they were never doing anything edgy, never interesting, never the one that was really leading what customers wanted. And when you look at that, the human work system of market research was actually limiting their ability to do big ideas. Because if you have to
Hmm.
wait till the very last mile to check, you're not learning anything. You're just doing a little CYA activity to make sure when I go forward with this, is it not going to flop?
Right.
So instead, we worked with them on a human work system that said, how do we make this such that anybody in the organization who has an idea for a new product could get it in on Thursday night, get it fielded on Friday, get the results Friday night in an effortless way? A whole systems redesign happened. Yes, did they end up coming with new products and services regularly? But of course, but what we loved even more is it started to create the right behaviors that drove more meaningful, unique product development. Because now you just removed all the barriers. It's not hard, it's not expensive. If you have an idea, just submit it by Thursday. You get instant feedback. You saw their PDSA cycles go up into hyperspace because they were testing so many more things. And we saw the average meaningful uniqueness score go off the charts because they're willing to try more things. Because what the heck, right? I'm just going to throw it on Thursday and see what happens. So it's those kinds of things where you have to look at the human work system and where is it limiting you or where is it helping you? And then the third thing that you need to look at is employee engagement, which I think this is
Hmm.
probably the least looked at when it comes to if I own innovation or I'm diagnosing our innovation capabilities. Why am I looking at employee engagement, which feels kind of HR? It feels very whole company wide. It doesn't feel like the function of innovation if it's in new product development or R&D or marketing, but it is, because sooner or later, whatever you come up with, if it works, is probably going to infect the organization. You probably need everybody
Hmm.
in the organization touching it, feeling it, supporting it. Finance has to figure out the package. Product design has to figure out what it looks like. The sales team has to sell it. I mean, everybody's getting connected to this innovation. And if you have a field force of people that aren't engaged in work, that they themselves don't think about ways and how to solve problems regularly, and the sort of the soil isn't tilled to be okay with change and okay with new stuff, then even if you create something cool, even if you have a good system, if you have no engagement, it falls flat too. So those three areas are really what you need to have. I was talking with an innovation leader the other day, and he was saying these feel like my mandates. These feel like if I'm in charge of innovation at my company, my three mandates should be, yes, what am I doing for innovation and growth? What am I doing to improve human work systems? And what am I doing on the employee engagement front to get everybody working on problem solving in a clever way?
I really love the clarity, those three areas for sure. The human work system stands out to me because as you're talking through this, the main thing in my mind was risk. Because what I ran into in helping organizations think about innovation is they often have, if they haven't done something really bad in the past to train employees not to promote ideas, they have ideas, but they're afraid to do things outside the norm. And it sounds like all three of these really fit together to help with that. But you were pushing on the cultural aspects there of the human work system to say we can do things faster and try things and actually do something that might be different if we're finding things helpful for the customer.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, love that. So culture is certainly a key aspect here. So we do some diagnostic work, understanding what really needs to be pushed on. We have this framework already in place to know where we need to invest in the organization. If we're going to put this together, are those the kind of the three big capabilities, the components that we need to put into place? Is that the system that we're going to instill in an organization, or are there other aspects that we need to be thinking about that are part of that system?
Yeah, those are the building blocks for sure. But I would say almost it's like there's a framing for them or there's a truth at the bottom of it all that you want to be considering. And we see organizations either be one or the other, but you really need to have an appreciation for both so that the constants of all three of those pieces of those capabilities are systems and psychology, is you have to be
Mhm.
thinking about that at every piece of the work. And you could call that left brain, right brain. You could call that culture meets how work is done. But to me, it's a little bit of, again, another opposite. It's another opposite way of how the culture gets built through the work. Because sometimes when we're working with lots of organizations and people are rightly scared. Now, will they say scared? No. Will they say fear? No. But you see the exhibits of it again when
Mhm.
people are turning down big ideas or they're kind of you're watching the body language inside of a meeting and there's lots of crossing of arms, a lot of heavy breathing. I mean, you realize you're antagonizing by the change that you're suggesting, the visceral reaction to change, which we humans are not great at anyway, right? We were built to fear that to survive. So it's reasonable to have those reactions. But I think it's also reasonable to address the psychology of that and not just make it like, well, you all just need to get on the bus. Like, you
Hmm.
just, nobody plays within the system. They're doing it right. We need to require compliance. We need to make sure everybody fills out their forms. Yes, you want people to comply, but in general, they want to do good work. Everybody wants to do good work. I mean, I have a really hard time finding, again, the majority of people that don't want to do work they're proud of, work that they love, and all of that can come to fruition when they're doing things that they really feel that they're engaged in and all these kinds of things. So the psychology piece matters. So let me give you a really specific example for this. So sometimes when we're working on a big idea with an organization and they've just incubated something that could be really cool, could be a new process internally, could be a new product, whatever it is, they speak it into an existence. Somebody mentions the idea. Maybe we're starting to see some of that negative body language that says we're making people nervous because it's a big idea. We don't know how to do it. We don't know who to sell it to. We don't know if customers will want it. All kinds of things start to come up as these thought balloons amongst people's heads.
Hmm.
So rather than saying, well, let's make this idea perfect and palatable inside our organization, because you never will get that, but everybody wants perfect and palatable, which rarely come together. Instead, we say, okay, the interesting idea, that's a good theory. But what do we see as the death threats for that idea? In that one little term, death threats, which sounds silly, sounds over dramatic, it changes so many things about the psychology of that situation. So all of a
Hmm.
sudden, it went from you and me, like fighting in an adversarial way, me pitching you an idea, and now you have to react and say if it's good or not good. And now we're on opposite sides of the table. If instead we go, that's an interesting idea, let's put it over here to the side. Let's now you and me talk about what are the death threats for that idea. All of a sudden, our brains just clicked into problem solving mode. They started to think about how do we work together on this idea to address risk. And it starts to become now a much more logical argument than the emotional one of I'm scared of that idea. I don't want to do it. And I'm going to find reasons not to do it and fight against it. So it's this appreciation across all three of those mandates. It's what system do we put in place to help people have more confidence, and how do we appreciate the psychology and employee engagement in human work systems, even in the growth stuff. It's like all those, you have to have that underpinning to really make sure that they're going to be in a healthy state.
Yeah, the psychology aspect can't be understated, I'm sure. That your death threat example reminds me of a tool that I was introduced to by an innovation colleague, the pre-mortem tool. On projects, we often do a post-mortem or a lessons learned retrospective kind of thing. This tool said at the beginning, well, if this was a huge failure, what are the things that we would have done wrong, right? What would have happened? And I like the death threat kind of perspective to really emphasize that, right? What are the death threats about this idea? Giving ourselves permission to think about what can go wrong and what we need to do. So really
Yeah.
good
Well,
tool.
and if you think about it too, I mean, just to double click on that,
Hmm.
it's almost building the psychological safety that we all say that we
Right.
want, right? Because it's giving me, I want to hear the risk. Let's address it up front. And it also makes people feel like, oh, well, I might be more likely to share an idea if I can say the death threat with the idea. That way, people won't even look at me and say, oh, Maggie's crazy. She's thinking those big ideas again. It's no, here's an idea, and then here's the risk that I see with it. So I pair it together so I don't feel
Hmm.
like I'm exposed. There's just a lot of great things that we aspire to as an organization on Maslow's pyramid of evolution there that are helpful when you try to put into practice small tactics like that.
Yeah, wanting to be part of a group that we're making good contributions to those social needs that we have for sure. Okay, let's talk about, we have framework we've discussed a little bit. The culture is a big aspect of this, the psychology. How do we make this real to actually make changes in an organization, right? We need to train people. What do they need to know? We need to influence different levels of the organization. There's the frontline employees up to senior leadership. How long does it kind of take to put a system into place? Give us some guidelines around this.
Yeah. Well, it's almost always relative to the size of the organization or the size of the group that needs to be impacted, right? Smaller the group, the more the impact, the faster the run, the longer, the bigger the organization.
Hmm.
But typically, the first thing that we're doing is, whenever possible, sitting with leadership, and we have what we call a possibility session. So it's half training, sort of. It's more awareness, but it's also getting them in alignment on what does innovation take. Because as we started this conversation about, it's more than people think. And I think AI and innovation have been in the same sort of way of conversation. People say, I want it, but they don't necessarily know what they want from it. They just know we should have that as an
Right.
organization. So let's go. So, a good place to start is with the leadership saying, let me show you what the possibilities are with innovation so that we start to set up the framing for what does innovation look like here? What do we want it to look like? Recognizing that has systems elements, recognizing that has employee engagement elements. So, that is helpful in a constant retouch back to leadership. Not that they have to be part of everything, but them knowing what's going on and staying and not being passive, but being active members of the innovation community, because ultimately it's really the thing that the leadership should own. It's really helpful. After that, and this can also be the thing that helps you diagnose this, you want to think, okay, of those three mandates, where's the place that I should begin? Because doing all three of them at once is pretty tough, but
Mm.
either one leads to the rest. So in many cases, we, in fact, at the PDMA conference where you and I see each other regularly, the ones that got the innovation award at Temper Sealy this year, they worked by starting on a big idea, right? They knew they needed to do some development for their product development stuff. They wanted to start off building a system towards that. How do we make this a more reliable practice that we do in the organization? So they started with a challenge. Let's come up with some ideas against this business development activity. So
Mhm.
they created some ideas there. That's a popular way to start, because those ideas then create the groundswell for, oh, now that we're going to go do them, now we need to go to the factory floor because some of those systems that we have won't deliver this new product, whatever it is. So then they moved into that systems work and then follow and follow it. So they started with the project. So you get real outcomes. You kind of learn as you go in a just do it kind of way. But then eventually they did get trained. So we teach people as levels. So there's yellow belt, there's blue belt, and there's black belt. And then for those that are just looking to learn to understand what this is all about, we have a white belt, but it's not really part of the learning journey. It's more of an informational thing. So those people that were running innovation, that had innovation in their title, they're black belts. So
Mhm.
they spend a year going through a black belt program, very immersive. It's all about how do I build innovation capabilities in my organization. So they sort of walked and chewed gum at the same time. They came up with real answers and they're like, let's get some black belts so we can keep this going. And then they would train people as blue belts who are more managers of projects and managers of people. So they knew the operating system of an innovation. How do we create ideas? How do we communicate them? How do we move them forward? And then the staff, the frontline staff, would go through yellow belt, which is a problem solving course. So that way, everyday problems that happen, they're using the same framework, language from small, medium, large inside the organization. They're all learning the same thing, just applied in kind of different ways. So that's one way to start, is get the leadership to understand what innovation looks like in general, then start with a project so you can kind of prove to yourself that it will work, and then let it then cascade down to the other levels. I've seen, though, other organizations who are very people focused, really intent on working on culture, have perhaps tried culture in other ways and it hasn't really taken a dent. And I see a lot of this happening, a lot of the organizations that are sort of working on how does work happen now, how does virtual and moving back to the office or not back into the office, all these things that
Mhm.
affect how we work together. They start on the other side. Let's start with an employee engagement. Let's win the hearts and minds of employees by working on ideas that are things that we know that are to be done. So I'm going to give you another psychology connect. Our founder, who you've interviewed a couple of times recently, wrote a book called Proactive Problem Solving. And in the book, he outlines this approach. So if anybody's a reader, go grab the book. It's a very
Mhm.
simple, easy read. But he talks about how he's trying to find tactics to get employees to really dig in and solve problems, and created kind of a, not a mantra, but a rally cry that is really interesting. So it's called Stop the Stupid. So when you go into any group and you ask, hey guys, are there stupid things we're doing here at work? Oh my gosh, how many hands go up? We all have things that we're like, well, that's dumb. We shouldn't be doing it. We shouldn't have this form. We shouldn't be having this meeting this way. We all have something that we probably think we could be doing better. So a lot of times we'll start culture work in that place. So let's teach everybody how to do that problem solving. And then let's start to put it to place in really tiny things within their sphere of influence so they can start to actually get a little more confidence in their own ability to
Mhm.
self-solve problems. And then from there, grow to working on systems. It's like we kind of have to start again. And an organization that's interested in culture and wants to kind of move that needle, starting with those small things, but working on lots of them, can help build then the capability and the appetite to then work on systems. And then once those are in place, you feel more adventurous to go do growth. So it kind of works both directions, but it's all laddered in hands-on project work, getting some basic training so you're all using the same vernacular, and then also working in a coaching environment, which is what we do. And then our goal is to get them started and then move out of the way. Sometimes we move out of the way and we're out of the picture in 6 months. Sometimes it's 4 years, just depending on the amount of the size of the organization, what they want to get done, how quickly they're moving, those kind of things.
Okay, so we have our framework of the three big core areas, the ideas, big idea, the human work systems, employee engagement. And now we're kind of, sounds like integrating that into the organization, thinking about the leader's perspective, their role. How do we want to start innovation? What does that mean to us, possibilities here? Looking at those running innovation, your black belts that really know innovation deeply and helping the organization overall. Managers, kind of what their role is in this, and the frontline employees who are closer to the customer, closer to actual problems, closer to the stupid things that we might do as an organization, and generating ideas about things that we should improve and fix and opportunities that we have. Did I summarize okay?
I mean, golly, Chad, you say it much more succinctly than I do. Maybe you should just do this podcast on your own, I think. That
I
was
don't think that's the
perfect.
case at all. We are learning from the master here who's done this many times over. It helps me to put the pieces together. I think it helps listeners as well. I do want to go back to this innovation leadership aspect and talk about the organizational leaders. Because more times than not, when I've been asked to help organizations with innovation things, usually the problem is that innovation leaders are not really setting the atmosphere. They're not stating that innovation is really important. That they may say the words, right? I think Steve Blank used the term innovation theater, and others have picked this up. That we say innovation is important to us, but we don't really do anything. Like, for example, I know too many organizations where they'll have a activity like a hackathon or an ideathon or some periodic thing they do to generate ideas. And then none of them actually get funded. They don't get resourced, right? So we get people excited about doing something new, but for whatever reason, we're not taking action on that. Can you help? What have you seen that actually works here at the senior leadership level to make innovation systems function? And have you seen problems like that, and what do you do about them?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing is framing innovation as a system. I think that's the biggest aha. I think still today there's a perception that it is, let's hire a clever person, perhaps a chief innovation officer that could come up with some clever things, constantly ask them, what are you doing lately and what have you delivered? The chief innovation officer and their team are running into all kinds of problems because the systems aren't set. And then we just say, oh, that didn't work. And then out we go. So innovation as a field is you can either describe it as fickle because we come and go out of things, or you could call it as
Hmm.
PDSA cycles. We set up different structures and we try and tire again if you look at the whole industry. But really, I believe that the biggest thing you can do with a leadership team is to get them to move from thinking about innovation as innovation, and you now got to think about innovation as systems. Innovation is systems. That's the only way it's going to stick and stay, is you have to think about it in a systems mindset, because that does what you're talking about or overcomes the situation you're just talking about. If you're thinking about, well, yes, running a hackathon, doing a stand-up event, doing the neat environmental things, setting up a room with lots of fun things and whiteboards and candy on the table, or other things that they point to innovation. They become visual elements that you could see, go, "Oh, well, it must happen here." But really, it's the system you need to be investing in, and far more than you think that you do. We always underappreciate the amount of time, effort, and sometimes money, but all of it that go into building, maintaining, and improving a system. So it's definitely not a set it, forget it. You want to get leadership to understand we need to put in an innovation system that moves all the way with all of our folks and then constantly be working on making it better, because that's what innovation is, right? It's constantly doing that. So that's the biggest thing, really, to get them to understand. It's just one unlock, but I think it really unlocks a lot because then they start to see the interstitial tissue. Then they start to see, in order to have that big thing that I want to take to the board and show customers and move the stock price or whatever it is, I have to have these other things inside so that that doesn't happen as a one-hit wonder. It happens reliably. And right now it's not reliable. When companies, especially, are either they're looking for a big win or they're looking for, I'm growing so fast I can't keep up and that's hard, and now it doesn't feel like innovation is the answer in that case. It feels like the opposite of what you should do in a case when you're growing. But it's like, but if you think about innovation systems, they would say, no, that we need to innovate how we work so that we can keep up with the growth.
Hmm.
So the biggest unlock for leadership teams or for anybody who's working to talk to leadership is keep beating the drum on it's not innovation, it's systems driven innovation. And that then starts to get the higher order conversation to start happening. What pieces do we need? What people do we need? How does the infrastructure start to work? What does it start to look like? And then it makes more sense to everybody. It's like you have a system for ordering things in procurement, you have a system for accounting, and because it's important and it needs to have some rigor, you need a system for innovation too. It's an important investment, and it's the reason why companies grow.
When it comes to innovation in an organization, we have operations, the ongoing core capability, right, of the company, and we have innovation kind of helping us thinking about what we can do next to create new value for customers or our organization. As you think about this innovation system, how much, I'm sure people are, this question came up in my mind as you were talking, so I'm sure people are thinking about this too. How much energy, how much resources, how much effort do we actually put towards this, right? Because the core is really important, that we want to keep the flywheel of operations continuing and not mess with that in any meaningful way. We want to improve things there. But on the innovation side, if we're not thinking about how the world's changing around us, we're not preparing for the future, we may not be around in a few years because we're not taking action. How do you think about dividing out resources? Is this a 90-10% type problem, or how do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple structures that I think are useful. I mean, one is some organizations like to have an innovation function, which is great. It can be a hodgepodge of, again, new product development, marketing tend to be the ones that eke that out. But I would say relabel that group again as the innovation systems team. And
Okay.
then when you look at that key team, you're allocating them against those sort of three areas. So one is not only setting up the systems for those three mandates, but then continually improving them. So a portion of that team is always looking at what does our innovation system look like and what does it get fed with? How do we make sure it's always better? So maybe they're working on continuous improvement, like we need more relationships with the universities because we need more stimulus for things that we can bring into our pipeline. So that's a systems project that they're constantly doing. If there's another couple of people on that team that are focused on human work systems. So we're going through the organization, helping different functions make smarter upgrades to how they work together. And then another group that's constantly beating the drum for the last area. So it's like you're kind of tackling people, you're tackling systems, you're tackling growth because there's people that have that purview. So that's one. And that's more like traditional innovation setup. There's a function for it that's serving the rest of the organization, but it's also incubating some of the bigger ideas. The other one, though, that I'm very much starting to fall in love with is thinking about more of do these does this capability or this ask inside the organization sit in other functions as
Hmm.
well, like a partner? So it's a partner to HR. Is there a section of HR that's committed to this innovation piece and doing projects and things that bring everybody along, but it's connected overtly to employee development, to leadership development, and those things, fusing it more into the main line of work as opposed to leaving it as this like satellite thing that kind of comes
Hmm.
across the whole? To me, that's I'm not going to say it's a smarter way to do it, but it's certainly it's harder to stop doing when it's wedded into the
Right.
work at the functions that already exist. So personally, that's how I like it. But
Hmm.
a lot of teams are very successful when they set up shop on their own.
Yeah, so you've seen both occur, that if we want to start this as an innovation system, maybe having a dedicated team, a chief innovation officer, kind of take that on and then infuse it through across the organization. Also having this core framework take shape inside existing functions, as you just shared. Having HR maybe focus on the employee engagement aspect of that. Have marketing help out with looking for the new big ideas and how do we create capabilities to keep that going, right? And have more sensing site sort of things going on. Okay, I can
Mhm.
see both those working well together. When unfortunately we see innovation capabilities in organizations just get killed off some of the time, when, especially when there's a downturn in the organization and they're looking to save costs and the like, metrics are pretty important for supporting the progress of these efforts so that we can show innovation is making a difference. And the work that you guys have done, I know Eureka Ranch has a strong connection to Edward Deming's work, and you value statistical analysis and creating metrics. A few I found, and you can let me know if these are right or not. Engineering systems implemented in organizations, you're getting 6 to 12 ideas per employee per year, implemented ideas, right? Not just ideas generated, right? That really caught my attention because it's easy to generate ideas, but not to implement them. And you see projects become 256% more valuable through development. Those are pretty big changes you're impacting. As a product leader, as an organizational leader that's looking at wanting to make an investment in an innovation system, what are some metrics that we should be keeping track of to help defend what we're doing and really show a return on investment?
Yeah. Yeah, I know KPIs are a thing, and you're right. We're a Deming aficionados in a lot of ways, and we're always on both sides of this issue because Deming would say, "Err." He would say rigor, he would say statistics, he would say reduce variation, he would say deal with all that, but he would be like, "Oh, holding people to these numbers and doing it this way," and it was the opposite reaction,
Hmm.
right? But that said, so when it comes to each one of those mandates, they kind of almost tell you what to measure. So there's some meta big picture ones, but there's also specific. So when it comes to those 6 to 12, that's the stop the stupid ideas. That's small stuff within the sphere of influence of the people that can affect their own things. So, and that is, I mean, it's something that you're doing a couple of cycles on, maybe one or two across a couple weeks, and then boom, you're putting that into action. They're very small things. So in that case, we don't even love tracking how many. It's more that you're watching the competence and looking for the exhibits inside the factory or inside the workplace that people are contributing more ideas or their hands go up a little bit more. But you can track just the number, not the value. We just say if you want to keep track of like how many stop the stupids have been shipped and watch that graph go up, that's good. And it would reinforce to others that we really want to do that. For KPIs for the systems thing, it's almost baked within the system itself. So if you're doing systems architecture, you actually are starting off by saying, hey, what's the system? What's its aim? What's its key metric? And then what are the enabling metrics of that system that you're redesigning?
Hmm.
So rather than saying, what's the one thing we're measuring as an organization, it's more like, no, you should be looking at how well those systems you've been redesigning are starting to perform against the variable that they were designed for. So in that first example we talked about, right, that KPI would be about how fast, how much spending are we doing on market research was a enabling metric. The big one was, is there meaningful uniqueness score going up? That was the goal of that system. So really make it locked into what the system was designed for, as opposed to just a bigger measure. And when it comes to the bigger ideas, I mean, there's a number of really useful ones to do that also speak to re double downing on the culture. So, how many ideas have we killed? Big ones that we tried and didn't do. That sends a great message inside the organization that we're trying things and we're okay as long as we learn. Looking at how fast you're moving things through the pipeline, and then a big one that we do on the culture side. On that end, on innovation, when they're working on growth, is also proactive versus reactive. So it's a very simple measure to say, how are we spending our time as an organization? Are we putting out fires or are we getting ahead in a meaningful way? Those are the big ones. What we'll typically do is, I think I've never met anybody that has a bigger database on culture than we do. From the beginning of our organization, we've pretty much been analyzing teams before we even work with them. So we've got this culture database on over 2,000 organizations. Plus, it started off with a big, heavy study at the beginning. And we'll run an innovation culture benchmark to help understand, like, where are you now? How are people feeling about things? So we'll measure their systems, we'll measure that proactive versus reactive, we'll measure their courage, we'll measure their appetite for change, we'll measure their urgency and their interest in innovation, which sometimes is a really simple thing to measure. And when you find out, wow, nobody cares. It's really hard to work on innovation when the score on interest and innovation and urgency is low. then you're like, well, I
Hmm.
guess we know what we need to work on now. So that's something that we'll often do. So, I mean, again, there's big picture things that you can look at no matter where you are, but we like to do a real assessment, like get everybody to weigh in. It's completely confidential. We do with teams all the time so that they can look at their own data and just go, how do we go from where we are to the next box up? Not Herculean, but where we are to the next box up. That's the measure. Because measuring too much against what's a basic benchmark out in the marketplace, it's like, I bet we can do better sometimes. Sometimes the benchmarks we
Hmm.
hold ourselves to are just the same, and we want to do better. We want to do different. We want to do a better version of us. So don't overthink it, I guess, is the moral of the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. And my guidance on metrics has always been measure those things you actually want to change, not the things that are already working, right? Like you said, we're trying to get to the next step, right? What would help us get to the next step? Figure that out.
Well said.
Speaking of next steps, what should we be doing in the next 30 days? I want to leave people with an idea of that they're excited about, thinking about kind of these three core areas, what they could work on. Let's make that practical in those terms. What's a good starting point?
Yeah. What I love for any individual to do is always think about what can I do in my sphere of influence? So usually when you start thinking about innovation, everybody always starts to think big across the organization. This doesn't work, that doesn't work. Here's why we could. And you're kind of doing an armchair quarterback a little bit because you don't have all the parts and pieces. In the next 30 days, think what can I control in my sphere of influence that I could innovate on and do something about? So you have your job and how you do it. You have your colleagues that work left and right of you. You have your leadership team and you have the people who work for you. So call that a bubble and say, what can I do to take action on within that bubble beyond without going beyond it? And then I would say pick just one of those three areas and go do some just observation about how well it's going or not going. So look on that bubble for employee engagement. See, do you feel like people feel like that they can share an idea and do something about it? Do you feel like the systems are set up for that? Do you and then just observe, do I feel like we're good at this just knowing the topic? Same thing for systems. Do I think people would put their hand up and say these systems don't work for us? Like just observe for a bit. And then once you have a better sense of that, then it's when you can start to kind of have the conversation around your team, around like what can we do to be better, maybe invest in some training or get some reading material. I mean, that have a book called Driving Eureka, which is great, but that one, practice problem solving, is really useful to how you can get started on a ground level. I mean, it really doesn't overdo it. It does that kind of sphere of influence piece.
Hmm.
And that's something that anybody can do, learn a little bit and then try some of the techniques in the book to see how can you get started. That's you in your own bubble. But if you start to go, you know what, I got Maggie, I am mandated. This is my thing. Then it's a little bit more extensive research and training about what to go do a little bit more, do some more reading, do some more homework, lots of things that we can connect people to too.
Excellent. What was the title of that book again for some foundational training?
It's called proactive problem solving.
Okay.
It's got kind of a fun backstory because it's a long story, which you can read in the book, but one of our sister company makes bourbon. So a lot of the examples are how they put it to place in a manufacturing environment where they're making bourbon on site. So it brings it very real and very simple terms, and it's kind of a fun story too.
Yeah, it's a great story that was glad to hear Doug talk a little bit about in a previous episode. But the thing that stands out to me is creating a bourbon that has competed and won competitions against 8-year aged bourbons. And this bourbon is aged in 45 minutes through a innovative process that they discovered. So good
Mhm.
story there. Anyone that loves bourbon as well. Okay, has been super helpful. I do like hearing innovation quotes. Before I ask you for one that you have to share with us, when it comes to training, if you're listening and specifically need training in product management, there's a great organization, the PDMA, the Product Development Management Association, that provides a certification opportunity. And the training is organized into 7 areas. And those 7 areas really prepare a solid foundation for product managers. And typically, I find it's people that have 3, 5, even 10 years of experience under their belt in product that engage in this to really round themselves out. And I have a system created called the RPM system, Rapid Product Mastery Experience, to get you grounded in those and prepare you for the certification. If you want to dive into that, simply go to productmasterynow.com/RPM to hear more. Maggie, let's hear about your quote, and then we'll follow up with some other resources for listeners as well.
My favorite quote would be Deming. 94% of the problem is the system, 6% is the worker. I truly believe that in my heart and soul to be true, that everybody wants to show up and do great work every single day, but are the systems that we're working within being an advocate for that, or are they being the one that holds us back from it? And I also think everybody has the opportunity to be incredible systems architects. I think it's hard work, but it's the kind of thing that when you do it, it's the rising tide that floats all boats. It really helps everybody across, but that by far, that's my favorite.
Yeah, if we're not getting the results that we want, it's probably a system issue, not a people issue. So, gotta have the right systems in place. Love that quote. Thanks for sharing that. You shared the book title before, but there's other resources at Eureka Ranch, your website. Where are the right places to go for people to learn more about thinking about this core framework and the resources to help people get prepared?
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to do actually, Chad, as you've inspired me with this conversation, a special thing for your listeners and whoever's on this podcast or listening to the
Hmm,
podcast. So it's something that we did on the heels of the last PDMA conference that seemed to be really popular with folks. So we're happy to extend it here to your listeners as well. There's a innovation engineering white belt certificate people can take. It's just basically an hour long online class, but it takes you through those three modules we talked about. So it talks to you
okay.
about employee engagement, it talks to you about human work systems, it talks to you about growth and asks you some questions about that. Then you actually get feedback from one of our premier black belts, and then you get a little certificate back from the whole thing. But it does a great orientation to what we all talked about
Hmm.
today. So we'll find a way to give a code out to your listeners. Maybe they can pop it in, and then it won't cost them anything. And we'll leave that up for free for a little while for them.
Fantastic. So we'll make sure the link is available in the show notes for that. We'll figure out what that is and we'll put it in the show notes. To find those show notes, you simply go to productmasterynow.com/579. We'll also have the link to Eureka Ranch, which is just eurekaranch.com. Resources there and information as well. Maggie, anything else that we should wrap up with?
This has been delightful, Chad. Having this conversation is great. I love that I'm sure the listeners probably feel similarly than we do. I mean, innovation's a good fight, man. It's a tough
Hmm.
one. It's riddled with so many pitfalls and gotchas and did it wrong and man, battle wounds and stories, but it's the work worth doing. It's such a joy. And so I think we're all in this together. There's 1,000 ways to do 1,000 things, and I love that we're all learning together on your podcast in other ways. I think that's what we got to do.
Well, thanks for bringing your experience to this discussion and helping people think about how to actually make innovation work inside their organization and how they can influence that. It's been a delightful conversation. Once again, productmasterynow.com/579 to find the link to the free white belt class and other resources as well. And as I always say, everyone, keep innovating.
Thank you for listening to Product Mastery Now, where product leaders and managers gain product mastery through practical knowledge, influence, and confidence. By listening, you are becoming a product master, creating products customers love. Find additional resources at productmasterynow.com. Keep innovating.